We're going to be looking at service and client discovery. So this is kind of still like an introduction to our microservices with Spring. So for this, we are going to create two Spring projects. Both are going to have the same Pom.xml file. However, I did have to modify it a little bit to get this to work. And I'll explain that in a little bit. So first, we want our Pom.xml file from our start Spring.io. It's going to look like this: Maven project, Java 2.71, and we're using the Eureka Discovery Client, Server, Web, and Cloud Bootstrap. We have jar and 8, and this can also be done when we make a starter project from our Eclipse. You can do it that way as well, but I'm doing it from Spring.io because I have some issues with that. So once both of our files are loaded, first thing that we're going to want to do is start our server. So I'm going to go into the service dis server. That's the name for this one. And then we have our microservice project, and that's going to be the name for the second one. So for our server dis, or the service dis server, we can open up this application here, and we want to do at enable Eureka server. And we want to make it a Eureka server so it is discoverable for others. Inside of our application.yml, which is a new file that we're going to make inside our src main resources. So we just go to new file and do application.yml. And we want to do application.yml because the application.properties only maps to something like Java. There's some reason that was in the video, but it's because that we have some kind of issue with that. So we're doing the YML here. So we want to configure this as a discovery server. It's going to be Eureka instance. We have our host name, and our host name is going to be our local host because we're locally hosting it. We have our client, and then we have it as not a client. We have the register with Eureka false and the fest registry false. And then we just have our server port listed here. Next, we are going to look at our Pom.xml because this is what we were having issues with, at least I was. So inside of here, this is what I have, and this actually came from the medium.com, and this is kind of like a Spring Cloud service discovery with Eureka. And inside of here, I got this Pom.xml file for setting up a Eureka server, and it worked. Now, with the one that I was looking at earlier when we made the project, it looks something like this. A little bit different, version 2.69. I don't know if it has to do with the versions, but for some reason, it was not working out correctly. It was something like that, but this is the current one, and the actual link to this will be in the description below the like button. So now we're going to want to run that. And once we run that, it's going to look something like this. Now, the only thing that'll be different is that we shouldn't have this accounts right here. We're going to make this application in a second. That's our microservice application. So inside of our microservice project, we're going to open this. We want to make it an @enable discovery client so we can get the discovery client from here. That's how you would do that. Then we want to make another YML file. So that's what we're going to do here. Now this is very similar to our previous YML file. And in this YML file, we use our local host because we are local hosting it. We have our registry as false because we don't want this to be discoverable, since we want to provide discovery service, and then we want to set the fetch as false because it's true by default. And of course, we're going to specify our user port here. So I don't know if I mentioned it, but make sure after this is done, we're going to go to our server file for Java. We're going to run as a Spring Boot app, and it should run like this. And then we can go back into our microservice in the application.yml, and we're going to use this information right here. So we have our registers right here, and then we have our discovery server access, so Eureka client service URL, and then we have our default zone. And this, you can notice, is the same as in this application YML file right here. So inside of our application YML file, we have it at port 8888. Inside of our applications.yml file, we want to have this at port 8888. So then we're going to have this at the server port 2222 that we're going to access this. And then we can run this just like we did the last one. But before we do that, make sure that unless your Pom.xml works, because mine didn't, we copy over the correct Pom.xml inside of here. So I'm going to be keeping that on standby and just using this occasionally whenever I need it to work. You might get some kind of like red error like this, but it will work correctly. So if we just go to our local host and we go into whatever we were looking at, local host that we're using for this one is going to be 8888. And it's going to come up with this once both of these are run. So if we click this, you can open a new tab, and it should look something like this for our 2222. And that's going to be it on how to have our service and client discovery with microservice and Spring Boot. So again, just want to make two files. It's going to look something like this with our spring.io. We're going to generate and then import these projects, just right-clicking, import, and then doing a Maven project, existing Maven project, import it that way. We want to make our service this application look like this with our enable Eureka server. We want to have a application.yml so that we can use it all around. It's going to look just like this. And then we want to modify our Pom.xml file because our Pom.xml file, at least when I generated it, has some issues. And then for our microservice project, we want to make something like this so we can access it with the enable discovery client. We want to search for it. And then in our application.yml, we want to search for our local host and then run this specific microservice on this port. And then edit the Pom.xml file for it to work correctly here. And that's going to be all for our Spring Boot. We have done with Spring Initializer, Eclipse, and that is it for setting up and the service and client discovery.